when you say that there were FBI assets in the crowd, in the building beforehand and certainly outside, what's the scale of this? You're talking like 10, 20?
No. So real hard, objective, and conservative estimates would put the number of FBI assets in the crowd, outside, and working inside at well over 200.
200?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have seen evidence, and that spurred your questions to Chris Wray, that there were FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters within the Capitol. So that is proof of entrapment, because, of course, the federal government could have prevented entry into the Capitol building. There aren't that many doors. You work there, you know. But they allowed people in on purpose to entrap them. That's what that proves, I think. Does it not?
Well, it's certainly condemning. It's another piece of the strategy that the government employed to sort of complete the entrapment of Americans that they had infiltrated and then prodded and provoked with those original seeds planted of actions like, what type of gear to wear and just in language that incited behavior that could go the wrong way. Pushing actions of legal and legitimate peaceful protests to an edge where those Americans would likely not have gone had they not been encouraged by the FBI plant amongst their number that they didn't know was there. So by the time it was actually J6 and you had masses of Americans assembled outside the Capitol, almost like 99.9%, 100% peaceful. On the inside, you had FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters that knew their way around the Capitol.
Before the doors even open.
Before the doors open. Or else how are you going to get around the Capitol? You've been there many times. You need a guide to get from whatever door you go in.
It's a labyrinth.
It's a maze inside there. So that's right. So there's no way, just Americans, most of which have never been to the Capitol, there's no way they can come in some random door that gets opened and then get their way directly to the statuary or the House chamber or the Senate chamber. It's just not possible. So the FBI assets that were dressed as Trump supporters that were inside the Capitol were there, I believe, and evidence indicates that they were there to specifically wave in the Trump supporters that had gathered outside the Capitol, and the doors opened and they were allowed in. And on the inside were there's some more Trump supporters. But really those were FBI assets, law enforcement assets that knew their way around the Capitol. And they waved those guys in, said, come on, follow us. And they're the ones that led them on the path directly. How do you think a guy's never been to the Capitol, gonna come into the Capitol all amped up on emotion and make his way straight to Nancy Pelosi's office? Come on. It's like I couldn't get it. There's no way. I've been there for 7 years. Could come in some random door at the Capitol and make my way to Nancy Pelosi.
Everything is unmarked. I mean, those leadership offices are unmarked. So how would you know
It's
that?
confusing to get around in the Capitol. Every American that has been there knows this. When you go on a tour, you bring your family to D.C., you go through the Capitol, you have to have a guide. And on January 6th, the guides were FBI assets, the law enforcement assets. And they were dressed as Trump supporters. They were positioned inside the Capitol prior to the doors being open so that the Americans that had assembled outside the Capitol, once allowed in, could be brought directly to the areas where the FBI and the DOJ and the deep state actors knew would be the most sort of condemning criminal action of Americans being inside the Capitol protesting without permit and things. So they knew they were setting the stage for arrest and prosecution.
It's such a crime. Who planned this, do you think?
Well, I think factions planned this. I wouldn't say who, Tucker, because I don't think there was one person that planned this, but I believe the faction of establishment liberals within the FBI and the Democrat Party and our intelligence services to another extent use their massive powers of surveillance and investigative assets that they have across the country, confidential informants, registered informants, non-registered informants, voluntary informants. It's a complex web of FBI assets across the country that can be activated. So if you have authority at some of the highest levels in the FBI, it doesn't take much. The faction within the FBI and within our intelligence services that would coordinate with the most extreme liberal factions within the Democrat Party that were desperate to keep Trump out of office and worked within the theater of operations, shall we say, that had been set by the COVID alleged medical emergencies nationwide and millions of mail-in ballots. There's no daylight between the compromised election cycle of November 2020 and ultimately what happened on J6. So you ask who planned this? This would be the combination of several of the most extreme liberal, anti-Trump, anti-America First factions that were in positions of authority within our federal law enforcement organizations and the Democrat Party across the country.
When you say that there were FBI assets in the crowd, in the building beforehand and certainly outside, what's the scale of this? You're talking like 10, 20?
No. Based upon some very conservative but like hard investigative effort, evaluation of the numbers, from putting together eyewitnesses and videos and affidavit statement and whistleblower statements and court records that have been revealed through individual criminal cases where J6 defendants have been prosecuted and smart attorneys have forced admissions by the DOJ and the FBI, but those admissions have been sealed within the parameter of that criminal case by protective order by the judge, so I can't share them, but I've seen them. So real hard, objective, and conservative estimates would put the number of FBI assets in the crowd, outside, and working inside at well over 200.
200?
Yeah.
So you're in law enforcement?
Yeah.
Before you came to Congress in the military as well? That's an extraordinary number. Is it?
Well, no. When you think about the scope of the operation, if you were going to do this, you would need that number.
But relative to, so like when, I don't know, Minneapolis burned down, or when St. John's, the Episcopal Church across from the White House in Lafayette Square, was set ablaze, and all those Secret Service agents were injured. Were there 200 FBI assets in the crowd among Antifa then?
I mean, I don't know how many undercover agents the FBI would have in a situation like that, but J6 was the was the final act prior to arrest and prosecution of Americans that were identified as Trump supporters. I mean, their objective was to destroy the entire MAGA movement, to forever stain the patriotic fervor that was associated with the America First MAGA movement that had won in 2016 and we believe won again in 2020. And the establishment on both sides, of both major parties, were determined to smash that out of existence, not just by defeating Trump, but by destroying the reputations of the movement itself, by creating this narrative that was totally false, but was heavily pushed, that MAGA Republicans, America First Republicans, are somehow a danger to our republic and a domestic terror threat, which is a whole nother story about what the FBI has done to tagging Americans as suspected domestic terrorists and following us as we travel across the country. But the bottom line is that 200, I believe, is a conservative number. Personally, I think there's many more, but a number that I'm comfortable going on record with is that we believe that there were easily 200 FBI undercover assets operating in the crowd, outside the Capitol, embedded into groups that entered the Capitol or provoked entry of the Capitol, and working with FBI assets that would have included Metro Police and Capitol Police that would dress as Trump supporters inside the Capitol, because those were the guys that knew their way around the Capitol. So given the scope of the operation and the number of doors where entry was allowed or even encouraged, then the number of people that were actually outside the Capitol and that entered, we believe 200 is a conservative number. Yes, sir.
Younger people say the news is full of lies.
Kennedy's motorcade.
239 people. The death of Jeffrey Epstein.